Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to another live stream of Shadowverse. Today is Monday, November 2nd. Let's see if we can actually load in here because we've got the old logo, and so that either is an indication that they've gotten rid of the old, the new art, which I question, or there was a slight loading issue there. So in the last stream, it turned out I had videos uploading from like two days. Maybe it was 16 hours. Maybe it was even less than 8 hours that I'd started an upload bundle, and apparently that was a thing that certainly slowed down my network, and we were getting a decent amount of frame drops. So apologies for that. I've checked that. It's just so many tabs open, it's easy to overlook at something. Yeah, we do have something here. We have a Champions Battle JP release bonus. So they are changing this, certainly we can see. And this is all from the Shadowverse anime, which started, I would say, less than 6 months ago in Japan. And what do we really need to cover here? It's a kids anime like Pokemon or Yu-Gi-Oh! Fairly obviously, the kid with the red hair is one of the main characters, the main protagonist, I imagine, with a whole bunch of potential friends and rivals. They go to basically an anime school in Japan, and much like Yu-Gi-Oh!, they play the Shadowverse game off of their cell phones, basically special cell phone like devices, and I'm not sure if there's really anything else to say other than this really does go to point that there is just a weird shift here. This looks like a very weird Gundam creature that we don't see. As far as I've heard, the anime doesn't give any of these characters really any special abilities, although it hints that this main character might have some special connection to the Shadowverse universe. The Shadowverse, as it were, seems to be completely just a game in the anime, although I wouldn't be surprised if later seasons reveal that them playing Shadowverse in their world actually is just another world that Purgation or Serenity is trying to destroy. But that would be really weird because this is trying to make it like way more kid friendly, and that's just really, really weird. Like, you have nearly 5 years of this game being about slightly lewd anime characters and a much more fantasy-based adult story to just say, well, we probably have lost that audience now and we've burnt out, so let's just basically make a completely different game or a completely different marketed game. It would almost make more sense if it was the other way around. Like, you could pull off a Digimon where Digimon Season 1 was very, very young kids, and then the kids started to age more and more with each season, to the point now where the kids are probably in their college level and their teenage levels, in at least that first generation of characters for Digimon. And I imagine Digimon at this point is more teen friendly and adult friendly than that first season, which was definitely for kids. But to go the opposite direction, to say, hey, we've been doing 5 years where we've been leaning teen plus to mature, and now we're trying to go E from everyone, is crazy. But it also goes to show certainly why there was a big censorship push recently with the Japanese cards, whereas the global cards kind of, I think, had already been censored. But it definitely, in a weird way, this is like the one thing that Shadowverse could do to really irritate a lot of its current players, and even me personally as a player base. It just does not make a lot of sense. Like, the Shadowverse cards always felt like maybe there was a third party developing them. But the idea of the push to be less and less around what the cards look like really just feels weird. In a funny way, I guess I never really have seen a card game that basically hired third-party or pre-made assets. But like here you can see, here's the person building a gun, which brings out an interesting question about, has there ever been a gun allowed in any of these cards? Very well, maybe not. We've seen bows and we've seen swords, but mostly the story has been fantasy based, so guns wouldn't normally be in there. I'm also tinkering, and I'm gonna not make any promises, but I'm tinkering with the idea of changing my scheduling stream to possibly Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays. My reasoning on Monday, Wednesday, and Fridays has perhaps slightly changed, and I think it might just work out better for my schedule, as it were, to do Tuesday, Thursdays, and Fridays instead. Let's see, what do we need to do? Havencraft and Portalcraft, and 6 matches, and win 3 matches in Swordcraft, Runecraft, or Dragoncraft, which I guess then, you know what, we've got to replace this at that rate. Swordcraft is our go. And as far as cards, we have a limited time, 21 hours. And that really goes to show I haven't been paying much attention. Is this the limited time Storm of Arrival? 1,000 premium currency. I feel like that's it. We have like no packs at all either, so I think at this point we'll just buy one of these and try to save up our gold. And I'll have to think about it more, but there's a decent argument here that I can't try and get 400 cards here and try and at the same time to get 400 cards here, to then just find out, oh, getting 400 cards actually doesn't help that much, and it would be a lot better to sit on your gold. The fact that they are going more kid-friendly also brings about some real weird questions about the older card packs. Most collectible card games don't ever focus on the older card packs, but yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if we saw even a stronger response in the form of, we aren't going to even allow you to play with the older card packs or the older cards. Like, that's why you would normally in this idea see a full fresh break here. Like, you would get rid of these characters, which, in all fairness, the maid samurai character archetype was always weird and always did feel weird. But yeah, I would think Shadowverse should have just made a clean break, made a whole new launcher, a whole new collection of cards, maybe even just a rotating like legacy server reboot of the collection. That wouldn't be terrible either. But at the end, it certainly does open up fears that what Shadowverse is and has been for the people who have been playing this whole time is going to get chipped away bit by bit. You usually don't see that in collectible card games, and usually if you do see that, it's way longer running collectible card games such as Magic the Gathering. Yeah. And I think it's probably not going to work if they were going to try and pull a Magic the Gathering, because well, the only reason why that worked for Magic the Gathering is because they were kind of the first collectible card game. So yeah, weird changes. That is definitely some weird changes. For the accountability section today, over the weekend I put together the Lego NES, which is a replica, slightly scaled down version of the Nintendo Entertainment System. It's basically two sets separated, 21 bags, but they were doing something different in Lego, where each bag was much more discreet. You were just doing one thing. Compared to a standard Lego set, and I'll try not to go into too much detail here since this isn't a Lego YouTube channel. Not that I haven't thought about potentially doing that. It's just that would get really, really expensive.
Now quiet, now furious.
It was basically two sets. The first set is the NES, the second set is a TV, and on the TV is a ribbon tape display of basically Mario World 1. And it goes in a loop and you turn a little crank, and it's very cutesy as an interactive element, but it really needed that interactive element. Otherwise you have just a model of an NES that lets you put a cartridge in and put it down and pull the cartridge out, a Lego cartridge that does nothing, and a TV without the ribbon tape that would have done absolutely nothing.
Is that a human?
So, yeah, I like the idea of them having more bags and smaller steps, but in most Lego sets, you would have had a minifig of some sort. There was no minifig in this set at all, which is almost jaw-dropping. Although it does come with a custom piece of a flat 2D Mario that you use, but that's it. You don't even get an extra one of those pieces to play with. It literally is just part of the build, and you have to snap it down. Where it would have been fairly easy for them to have had a Mario and Luigi mini piece. This set has extra effort built into it to connect with the not included digital Bluetooth Mario sets that they're selling. But it really goes to show how Nintendo has definitely pushed Lego to do something very different from what they normally would do and just break convention completely. And I don't think that was a wise decision at its core, because it did make for a weird set, a rather expensive set. The piece count is deceptive for it. It's a very nice set. I made a couple of modifications, and there was also some information that they were writing a paragraph or two about the NES, and they were just describing it and using phrases that I just don't think was in the marketing with the NES. And as somebody who has nostalgia from it and doesn't think that their memories are that fuzzy, some of it felt a little bit off, as if it was a Japanese company talking to a Swedish company, then trying to translate it to English, or they just didn't put that much effort to it. There's also like no expandability on this idea, unless they were going to really, really rip you off and make you buy the exact same pieces to build a second cartridge that then you could put a different sticker on, and then a bunch of pieces to change the feed tape to look like a different character. And that would be at best a $50 set, and I almost certainly they would want to charge $90 for it. The feed tape is designed to only rotate in one way, which is going from the left to the right, which would accomplish most side-scrolling games, but it certainly wouldn't work for things like Donkey Kong or Duck Hunt, which getting a zapper with a Duck Hunt cartridge would be an interesting idea, and a Rob. I could see those happening, but if they give you a Rob, then you would have to figure out what game you want to give with Rob. You could give the game that it came with, but that was barely a demo, and nobody even really remembers that.
You must die.
But after you did the Zapper and the Rob, then you're talking about potentially a different set to do the revised version of the NES, or a different set to do the Super NES. Like there's a decent number of Nintendo first party games that they could still highlight. Probably not Punch-Out though, and probably not Metroid. So you might get a Zelda, and if they were gonna do anything more, which is that's a big if. I imagine they won't, because the sets themselves are too expensive. The TV needed to be its own separate thing, and that too would be an issue. Yeah, am I hearing beeping? Yeah, I'm expecting a delivery that I misscheduled, so I might at any point have to immediately just pause the stream. So let me see if I'm hearing beeping, or if I'm simply hearing the beeping as a background sound. Alright, now I'm just hearing beeping as background noise. It's very pretty. It'd also be very easy to throw in a it'd be very easy to throw in a actual screen into the Lego TV and put in a Raspberry Pi in the back. There's more than enough room for that, and then it would just be a matter of squeezing out the right cords through the Lego pieces, like figuring out where you would just put a opening and put out a USB cord to a controller and a power plug, and that would be actually fairly easy to do with just small modifications here and there. But also I'm not sure. I'm not sure if that's where they would want to really go with it, and going in the digital realm. It'd also be fairly easy to modify the TV to just have a TV, a cell phone stand in it, and you just put a cell phone holding there, and then it displays. But yeah, I would say it needed minifigs. It needed interactivity. It definitely scared me to crate. Really, it scared me quite a lot when I saw that it was 21 bags. That was like really an unreasonable number if it was the actual size of an actual bag. But what Lego sets have done in the past is they've been giving, they would make bags that would have probably 100, maybe 120 pieces in them, and you'd build 2 or 3 different things. Often it was built with the mentality of, well, we need to get a room done, we need to get a floor done, we need to get some kind of play set. Almost everything is a building of some sort in Lego. And then that just wasn't the case. Like, there was one bag that was literally just 36 of the exact same pieces, and I've only seen a bag with only one piece, one style piece, once before, and that was when I was building the ship in the bottle, and there was a massive amount of 1x1 clear studs. I made a couple of changes, and it comes with like a rubber hose that is supposed to be the controller to the NES controller, and that rubber hose is just like static, clingy, and sticky. So it's just like I pulled out of the bag, and immediately it just picked up all the dirt and crumbs on the table I was using, and I'm like, oh man, this is awful. And then I go and wash it, and then it cleaned it up quite a bit, and then but it's still sticky. And they don't give you a power plug cord or anything like that because they don't want to nationalize the sets. They don't want to have to put different kinds of power plugs for different regions. So overall, it was a set I liked, but it was also a set to consider as a very, very expensive premium model that will sit on the counter. The flap to the NES that opens up where you put the cartridge in had a couple pieces that were studs on top, and I imagine the reason why they were 2x1 studs on top flat bricks just in the way to stop the hinge on the door from opening all the way. I imagine that's because they just didn't want to create a situation where you might break or disassemble the lid as you flap it up and down. But it made the top look really ugly because there was just two little bricks with studs on tops, and everything else was what they call snot bricks and studs not on top. So it was very smooth. The NES, as it were, it was a over visually engineered box, and that made for a much bigger building experience than if you were to literally just build, say, a Xbox Series X today in Lego, where that would just be a lot of black bricks and nothing else. Just make a black box. There's a little Easter egg in the NES. They had enough room on one side to put a micro scale depiction of World 1-1 again of Mario, so it's just all about Mario. None of the other NES games, which is odd because it seemed like there would have been room on the other side to put another Easter egg, and there isn't. The little expansion port cover is not included, nor is the expansion port itself on the bottom. The bottom is literally just flat. There are no connecting wires. There's no RF adapter that came with the NES, which I doubt anybody's really going to bemoan the fact that there isn't a Lego brick RF adapter, but it did come with the NES. There was only one controller. The controller feels wrong and in the wrong scale. I think the controller, more than even the console, needed to probably been a 1-to-1 replica of the original thing, but that's the price you pay for buying something certainly in Lego versus building something with the original plastic and screws and circuit boards. And even now, like the NES Switch controllers are not, I think, actually in the same size and shape as the original controllers, because those controllers were uncomfortably badly designed. Not that they would have really known.
Let's speed things up.
Like this was basically Nintendo's first attempt, so not super surprised they didn't have perfect controllers. They don't have perfect controllers now. Is there anything else to say about it? No, not really. It's very pretty. It's definitely one of those Lego sets that goes on a bookshelf, which that was definitely how I started doing Lego, is that I was getting just an occasional set here and there that go on the bookshelf, and that is just grown larger and larger
Raise your blade.
over time, where I'm at this point very much
Them for.
building an entire Lego city.
I shall overcome
I did a lot of organization in the past
What?
week or so too, of just organizing the manuals and the boxes, which I'm holding on to stupidly. But yeah,
Embrace all manner of spellcraft.
it was fine. Of course,
You ready for the good stuff?
I could certainly be persuaded to reduce the amount of Lego I do. Like,
the order will remain.
but it is something that
Find a brighter future for
I try to do to get some peace and relaxation. I didn't even realize that this weekend was Halloween, so that just flew by. Although it does seem like a lot of people, despite probably knowing better, did choose to go and trick or treat with their kids and potentially not social distance. If anything, I would say I think I've saw at least a small percentage of people actively taking their kids trick or treating to just be contrarian. People who literally would not have celebrated Halloween in the past in that way or at all, because there is a small percentage of people, hyper puritanical fundamentalists, usually Christians, but also I wouldn't be surprised if there's some other religions that just absolutely hate Halloween and
won't be long now.
and refuse to let their kids celebrate it, which is just wrong mentality, because it is just this insane thought that any normal average person who celebrates Halloween is celebrating some witchcraft, devil worship type BS, whatever muds is sling against Halloween, instead of looking at it as, hey, this is just a normal Western holiday that everybody celebrates, and if you want your kids to be normal and have a normal childhood experience, you just take part of it. It's not like it's doing major harm.
An exemplary battle.
Yeah. And Halloween can be like a great point, certainly, even if you are a hyper puritanical fundamentalist type religious person. It's a great point to realize for yourself as a parent or teach your kids the difference between pretend and reality, and how these people are just pretending and just having fun dressing up. None of this is real monsters. None of this is scary. This is just being done in good fun. And yeah, most people believe in having fun. Small percentage of people don't. And it at a certain point becomes just preaching to the choir, or preaching to people who won't listen. As far as any Halloween haters out
You
there.
must die.
I enjoy personally that Halloween exists, but don't actively participate in it because I don't really care that much. Nor am I obliged to take anybody else out, take any kids trick-or-treating or anything. And they've pretty much gotten rid of the idea of actually trick-or-treating down streets, which is a smart move for safety reasons and for just participation reasons. Alright, as far as the other accountability stuff, just been working on my server. It took me forever, but I think I finally got it to work. It's just, frankly, a nightmare. Moving over from Apache to Nginx to do a reverse proxy. The problem is these subdomains, virtual hosts, particularly in Docker, using the Docker as the out of wrapper of this and sandboxing everything. When I want a website to potentially be hosted, by default it wants to host on the root directory. So www.google.com, for instance, there's a server behind there that gives you all the files past that first forward slash for everything on google.com, one assumes at least. I wouldn't be surprised if actually the images and shopping and all of those are actually their own separate servers, but who knows. But when I try to make a subdirectory and say, all right, well, everything past this point is going to be the email, so everything www.google.com/mail is going to be hosted by a different server. Well, all the HTML there, all the code was not expecting that extra /mail/ to be in the reference. So you have to make a rewriting rule of some point that modifies the internal HTML that is sent back to the servers as kind of a man in the middle, nobody knows this is happening adjustment. And there are hundreds upon hundreds of results that I had to go through to figure out how to get this to really work, because it just did not want to work, and it barely even worked at that point. I got one server so far to work, and it seems like it's working fine, and now I'm going to start moving to try and get a second server to work and see what problems that comes about. But yeah, it's much more complicated, and it's taken a lot more time, and this is just kind of always the issue, is that there's just always a
I won't stop singing until there's world peace.
there's just like always that issue with working on a server, and I just want to get it to work and just be done with it.
No one gets past me.
Interesting. But yeah, that's been the other thing I've been working on, certainly, is the server. Whenever I would need a break between the Lego things, and generally I would take a break after like 1 or 2 bags on the Legos, and since they were smaller bags, more discrete building sections, I was able to do 3 or 4. But I definitely felt like I kind of had to rush to try and get it done at the end of the weekend, which was just an arbitrary decision, frankly, on my part. But yeah, I think I would want to potentially have a slower experience with some of these Lego sets than what I've done in the past. Just small building sections, instead of trying to make a weekend out of it and kind of rushing. I feel like when I built some of my other sets, I was a lot slower, and that was definitely a factor also.
It won't be long now.
The streets have eyes
Okay.
behind you.
The gods have been outrivaled.
1, 2.
No one gets past me.
Then I'm gonna win here.
I failed to understand you.
Yep. Alright, well, we don't need to go long, particularly since I'm waiting for grocery deliveries, if that's what I said. I said delivery, but whatever, grocery delivery. The stupid grocery app I use is terrible, and it messed up, and then when in an attempt to not waste an hour or so of building up the grocery list, I went to the website, and when I went to the website, I didn't click the right day. So let's cover the video game news. We have a Gematsu article here. Superior Lone Survivor has been announced for Switch and PC. Okay. This looks like this might be something, but we just never know. I also set a setting trying to fix the issue. Yeah, I don't think this teaser is going to show us anything other than people on the train. Yeah, I set a registry setting to try and see if I could get the games to not move around when I turn off one monitor, but I don't think it actually fixed it. I think it just messed something else up, and I didn't want to go and change the setting back at the moment, right before his stream, because that could be a hassle. Certainly.
Too slow.
Next, we have a game on Steam here called Blade of Arena, which looks like it's an RPG game where you may play as a dragon or a cat-eared guy with a sword. Let's see, early access 419, bunch of languages. I'll be really generous and put this on the fall list, except for I'm signed out. Which means this entire stream today is going to be a bit of a hassle, isn't it? Alright, well.
Too slow.
So I'll just have to leave all these tabs open. Blair Witch lives to scare again on Oculus Quest. Which, okay. Yeah. It's a little surprising that Blair Witch is still being a thing. As it were. I would have thought they would have stopped that. If I played this on the 8th turn, then I could play this. Then if I played this, I suppose that might help.
Too slow.
Tech Raptor has the remothered Broken Porcelain review. Let's see what they gave it. This looks like an actually decent horror game. They give it an 8.0. Remothered Broken Porcelain is a cat and mouse horror game with a love story sprinkled in. It looks and sounds great, but is rather short and bugs can mar the experience. Pros, gorgeous visuals, great soundtracks, and emotional deep story. Cons are bugginess, mild to severe. Rather short, linear. Moth Eye is clunky. Moth Eye must be a ability or
Raise your blade.
either an ability or a character. I almost wouldn't hate playing a horror game that's more linear and shorter, because there's just so many of them. At a certain point that just becomes circular logic, where it's like, there's so many horror games, I just wish they were all shorter. Which you could certainly make that argument for like visual novels. Like, there's so many visual novels, I wish they were all shorter, except for the reason that visual novels are enjoyed is because they're so long by actual visual novel fans. And at a certain point, I do probably need to admit to myself, hey, I'm not the fandom there. We could evolve this and then kill that and play this.
Is that a human?
You are done for.
I'm done sticking my head in the clouds.
Call me short.
Let's go ahead and hit that,
Too slow.
that,
I told you
that,
to leave.
and then the turn.
There's further
I
study.
think we want to see, adjust something. Hey, and I'm back up to 1280 by 720. I don't know.
You won't get past me that easy.
Oh, why'd it have to be a clear day?
Let's see. Sound effects, sound effects, sound
Should've been
effects.
quicker.
Guess we'll just take it down to that.
Shadowverse.
And that. I think I want to set the resolution back on my monitor. I've been going around in circles, certainly around this idea, but I think I do want to set the resolution DPI back up to 120. I just don't think that that's it's just a little too difficult to read the text. So first monitor 125 DPI, second monitor 125, third monitor, which is closer and smaller, 100 is what I'm thinking. Next we have a game on Steam here called Glitch Assassin, which is a VR shooting game that doesn't look unique enough. You're just shooting like this, which maybe if you're doing something like Super Hot instead of just shooting, there might be enough of an idea there. $7.99, English, full audio. Maybe I should just stop saying allegedly. Going forward, I'm just going to say full audio. I'm going to try and learn to say full audio instead, and everyone can just assume that I mean allegedly at that point. Alright. +2, +2. Alright. Or rush and kill that.
Forward march. Raise. Oh no, you don't.
You'll never hurt Otohime.
That
You'll never hurt Otohime.
and that. Next we have a game on Steam here called Ghost in the Pool, which feels like it's possibly a Korean manga. Looks really, really, really gross looking. $4.49, English and Chinese. It's tagged as early access and interactive fiction. I think I want to put this. They're saying it's Japanese, but it supports only English and Chinese, so there's some weirdness in that certainly also. Okay, do this, and then do this. I mean, you pretty much have to do this. See, I imagine what we will see is a decent number of horror games that come that come around even past Halloween, because they just slightly missed the date, and very quickly it's going to be kind of silly, but also it's not like we have a ton of Thanksgiving, American Thanksgiving games that ever come out, and while there probably will be Black Friday sales and sales like that, there's usually not that many. Oh, that is just some great ABS there. I do not feel like I should have lost to that. And that's going to kind of stink in the sense that we may very, very easily, either I just won't play enough on these daily arena runs, which I'm just not. I never really have gotten anywhere as excited about doing these, playing Shadowverse as I was with Magic the Gathering, or even my early days. Okay, well, these don't have to be done in ranked. They can be unranked or arena also. so they don't have to be done specifically in arena. Okay, so we're in slightly better position than what I thought we were. Rotation, swordcraft, play. Maybe we'll just get a quick disconnect. Here we have a game on Steam called Dreadful Shadows, which seems like it's a bit of a dark screenshot game. It's tagged as early access survival horror. It's $13.99 English only. Full audio. Single player online player versus player. Yeah. This definitely feels like this is a player versus player only experience. And for that reason, I think it's fairly obvious it won't make it to my follow list. Here we have a game called Puzzletronics, which is basically just a line puzzle, but with electronics in it, so that does have a nice visual difference to it. It's a single screen Unity game. They're calling it also, it's tagged as a clicker and a match 3 game, which I don't think there's some real truth to that. This is a weird circuit if you were actually going to use this as an electrical circuit, in the fact that this one here is sort of like a delta circuit, although I don't even know what you would call it, with 4 circuits, in which electricity might be applied here, and then you might be testing the electricity out at this point, or even at this point, or even at this point, or this point. Delta circuits were some of the last things I learned in electronics in my 2 years of high school electronics, so they seem to be really, really complicated, and they seem to really focus on them as a second year advanced. In the practical real world, I don't think delta circuits are used at all. They used to be used on like big TVs and such, big analog things, but as we pretty much have everything now on digital binary circuitry and transistors, delta circuits I don't think play any real role there for almost any design. And we are now working our way slowly towards the idea of quantum circuitry, which just kind of changes everything. Do I want to put this game on the fall list is the question. You also have some capacitors here that they're probably not doing anything with the capacitors. Here you have a transistor in the middle, which I don't think you really would learn electronics through this. I think you really are just making a side puzzle. It's 59 cents, bunch of languages, and then 10 achievements that are numbers. Would I have fun there? I kind of want to put it on the follow list, but this also is one of those games where it almost certainly will never get played. Which, at this point, that list includes one more in Shadow of Mordor. I believe it is the sequel, right, to Middle-earth, the first Middle-earth game, which, because that game, and we'll talk about it when we see the article, is getting completely it's removing all of its online ability. Man, I'm doing a lot of uhs and ums today. That sucks. Let me see if we can take a brief breath and catch my breath. That's probably what I need to do, is just breathe in, breathe out. take a calming breath, recenter yourself, and then try to continue talking. That's probably what a lot of people need to do, and it's definitely something obviously I haven't learned. I did take a speech class, but it wasn't like anything informative, nor was I really paying attention. And frankly, speech, I think it was more of a debate class than a speech class. The speech should be taught more as, here's how you give a presentation, here's how you talk to people, here's how you script yourself out. A lot of people are speaking off of teleprompters and scripting, so that they never really are thinking off the top of their head. And seemingly a lot of people just don't have the ability to think and talk at the same time, as funny as that might sound. But yeah, when I do these presentations, they are certainly off the cuff, and I on occasion do have trouble with focusing in and talking. Right.
It won't be long now.
Well, I should have put another allied person in play. Darn it.
Strife becomes gunfire.
Yeah.
Your mission is to come back alive. This is jolly good fun.
So had I put that on the field, I could have killed that.
Don't fall out of line.
Moving on, we have a game on Steam here called The Hunter's Journal Red Ripper, which looks like it's mostly a text-based thing with some little art. If these were like cell phone games and there was more, for lack of a better term, Western visual novel style games, I might be a lot more amenable to them. But putting them on Steam, selling them for $4.19, English, allegedly full audio, which, yeah, I feel like I personally need to say allegedly full audio in some of these cases, instead of just trying to be lazy and skipping it. Let's go and hit that. Like, yeah, I just don't think that that's a wisely marketed game.
I shall give birth to a new world.
Making sure this next game is YouTube family friendly. Here we have one that's all just Asian characters. Seems to be a anime girl visual novel. It's tagged as dating sim. Seems to have mostly a focus on one main character. English is not supported, $7.64 Chinese only. But for a Chinese game, a Chinese language game, it doesn't look terrible. You can kind of indicate when you see an empty scene and there's just no characters. That tends to be an indicator of a Chinese game. A Japanese marketed visual novel would never use a screenshot up to not show something. It's almost an argument that China appreciates empty space, where Japanese people appreciate full spaces or spaces full of people, or spaces full of anime characters. Let's be realistic. They're not real people. They don't even barely look human. Which I imagine some of that definitely has to do with culture. Like before there was Tokyo and everybody was squashed together, the Japanese society tended to be more open spaces, very few people close by. And if you're not living in Tokyo even now, that is definitely an experience and a lifestyle you can have, where in China, I imagine there are very, very few places that anyone other than the just ultra rich can go where they aren't going to be constantly surrounded by other characters, other people.
Don't count your tanukis just yet.
Okay. Do we just want this to hit us? I mean, I kind of can't do anything. Darn it. Next we have a game on Steam that's Asian characters and then called Oni, as in, I guess, demon. It seems to be you play as a demon in this probably cheap Chinese game, and it definitely seems to have concepts of gameplay, but watching the video, I don't think there actually is gameplay. Early access, English not supported, $6.01. But again, much more visual polish in this than what we have been saying. So, if we could see the level of quality just slowly get pulled up, or fairly quickly even get pulled up in level of quality for Chinese releases, I'd be very surprised and happy with that. Okay. Is there any way we survive this? I mean, you basically have to hit that. You basically have to hit that. And hit that. And you can play that. And at that point it does like 4 damage to everybody and kills everything. And then he does 4 damage and he wins the game. Gametsu has an article here. The Dark Pictures and Anthology House of Ashes has been announced. Seems like it was literally a week ago that the Dark Pictures Anthology game was just released. But I guess that makes sense, particularly if this game is going to come out around Halloween 2021. Like, arguably, doing an anthology where you release a game once a year is not really any different than doing a annualized release of games. So, you know, I really have to question whether they are kind of abusing the idea of an anthology, where I feel like an anthology probably should come out maybe every 6 months, but I don't think there actually is any evidence to back up that idea. Because if I thought about movie anthologies, they probably come out every 2 or 3 years. TV anthologies would be like that FX horror series where every season was a different story, and they came out about once a year. So book anthologies probably come out once a year minimum.
I guess you're looking for a fight.
So I'm probably just wrong, as it were, as far as confusing the idea of what an episodic series would be versus a anthology series. Or perhaps I'm taking more meaning into the word anthology, and maybe anthology means no indication whatsoever as far as the release date, and it's just 100% this is a generic theme and title that we're going to release discrete stories behind, like Twilight Zone. Which even Twilight Zone, I think you could fairly subdivide the Twilight Zone episodes into different experiences. Moving on, we have a game on Steam here called Flavor Town, which I think is a just joke game by the looks of it. Joke VR game. $5.99. It's a little cheap for a VR game. English full audio. Yep.
So this is my end.
Yeah. This definitely feels like something you would want to see PewDiePie or some streamer play, or the creators of the game would like to see some streamer like PewDiePie play
No one gets
to
past me.
make it more popular. But even at that, a VR game is going to have trouble selling. Next, we have a game on Steam called Above the Stars, which it seems like that's kind of nothing. Looks like a space game. $3.39, English only. No, not anything that catches my attention. Let's see. Strike, summon the night, or do this.
Is that a human?
You're done for.
I'm done sticking my. I told
Hit
you to
that,
leave.
hit that,
No one gets
hit
past me.
that.
Unbelievable.
Do we want to put this on the field, or do we want to wait on it? Probably shouldn't ever wait on any cards like this and just put them on the field. Although, it's not like my strategy of flooding the field is particularly great. It seems like there's enough counters every turn that most players have to clear the board and reset it for the next turn, while they still are working on their showstopper reward at the end that wins the game for them.
Take down all the
Next, we have a game on Steam here called Ink, which looks like it's a lot of dark screenshot syndrome. It looks like there's some 3D visual platforms. It's coming soon, apparently. English, so there's no price or anything like that to even talk about. So that's definitely a premature listing. And is there a way I could have curated that better? So we hadn't talked about that.
Fear not, for I am here.
That's a good question. I'm trying to think if what's on Steam always lists a price unless there isn't a price. And that means that if I check for a price on the links on Twitter, if I could potentially not open things that are free demos or otherwise. Inherently, if I were to move to Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday on streaming, it doesn't change really the lengths of the stream. The only thing that would do that is if I was to stream every single day, and I'm just not willing to do that. If I was going to try and even begin to play around with that thought, it would be certainly on the caveat that there would be a lot of days where I just don't get it done and take days off. So, and frankly, just every single day is just a ridiculous thought for any job or any endeavor. Even every single weekday is kind of a ridiculous thought for streaming. But it would certainly help with the fact that not a lot of news comes out by the time I start streaming on Monday. And then there's usually a ton of news on Friday and nobody watching on Friday. So it is a good thought just for viewers. Next we have a game on Steam called Sector's Edge, which is a Minecraft looking first person shooter. It's early access, free to play, with in-app purchases, English. Okay.
Blessed by the heavens.
Okay.
You'll
hit this, hit this, hit that. Let's see. Gematsu had this article, Assassin's Creed Syndicate, Assassin's Creed Chronicles series not backward compatible with PS5, update inaccurate. So, see, Ubisoft has pulled the news post from Ubisoft Connect citing inaccuracies. A Ubisoft representative told Gematsu in an email, "We have pulled the Ubisoft Connect article and forum post regarding backward compatibility for the time being, as there may be inaccuracies involving Ubisoft titles that will be playable on the PS5." Which is to say, there's a decent chance that all of these games aren't PS5 backwards compatible, but I wouldn't be surprised if they spend the effort to make either Star Trek Bridge Crew or Risk or one of the cheaper games backwards compatible, just to invalidate this list enough to say to pull this article. The clear, obvious thing here is they didn't want to have to admit this, but it was on their own post, so somebody shot their mouth off without getting PR's approval as far as what the real truth is. It may very well be that there's a director developer inside of Ubisoft that's trying to push for these things to be backwards compatible, and Ubisoft's management just doesn't want to spend the time on it or spend the money on it, instead hoping to potentially resell it. So this could be an internal struggle.
Walk in congregation and die in isolation.
Alright, so we've got 19 health, and we could either kill a bunch of things or let him do 13, 2, 4, 6. That gets him down to 1. So if he can figure out a way to buff up these characters quite a bit and win in this turn, or take 2 turns, he wins. But I'm not sure if that's going to happen. Here we have a game on Steam that's all Asian characters. It looks to me like it's part visual novel and part like adventure game. Probably Chinese if I was to guess. $3.59, yeah. Once again, not a terrible looking game though. Looks maybe a little bit more like a cell phone game than a PC game, but we get a lot of that. Are you gonna win? You know, he's gonna play this, which does like 12 damage. Wow, he is gonna win.
An exemplary battle.
See, that's a great example of a card that you do something like this, and probably at that point need to come this way, and then let's see, replay, and I guess replay this. So if you're going to straight up replay the game, you're literally just going to replay the whole game.
For a fight.
I've never actually looked at this. But how fast does this whole play out? Like, because this would have to play like extraordinarily fast, and you can skip turns, but they've taken the whole like delay out. Interesting. So it does look like if you had just an amazing experience, you could show it off. But if you were going to do commentary on this, you would have to pause like crazy, and there's no replay speed that's adjustable at all.
Sticking my head in the clouds.
So, like, if I want to click on this, I can right click on the cards to see them.
Oh, why'd it have to be a clear day?
And the log fills at the same speed.
Preserve the peace at your service.
But yeah, if you were gonna commentate on this, you would have to do this, and then suppose you could step through it. It's confusing to have a line behind the triangle and then a triangle behind the line, but I guess that's what that means. It might be a
It won't be long now.
thought. What's weird though is the stepping does seem like sometimes it just doesn't do anything. Where it seems like it's
The fishies are dancing. I go
slowly moving.
ends here. Time to see what I can do.
I don't even know if this is the last game I played though. I wouldn't be surprised if it just takes a little while to save the log. Where ideally, if you were going to want to go back and replay a game, it almost certainly would be the game you just played. So that should be prompted at the end of the game.
Whisper, a wicked curse. Curses upon you. This ends here. I'll kneel before my word.
Shall I grant your fragile dreams?
Y'all could use a magical girl.
See, I think this was the point
Hime.
where
Hime.
we were about to lose, or we were about to win.
Obligation. And die in isolation.
No, no.
There we go. So he does Angelic Strike. And then he attacks with that to make room. Attacks, I guess, is to kill that. Then he does Ginger's Course to change the cost of card to 1.
You're done for. Miracle
Okay. So Zeus the Supreme. Randomly activate one of the following effects. Do this X times. X equals the number of times allied followers have evolved this match. Restore 5 defense to your leader. Gain +3/+3. And the ability to ignore ward. Gain +2/+1. And Storm, which you must have gotten that. Gain +1/+2. Gain Bane and +0/+3 and gain Ward. So Zeus. He's a 5/5. So in some version he got +3/+0 and +4. So he ignored Ward and +4/+2 had to have been +2/+1 twice. And then he restored 15 health, which means 3 times. So he had like 8 characters evolve. And so this entire deck was around the idea of him evolving.
An exemplary battle.
So it looks like we need Zeus. And then after you're done with the replay, it brings you back to this point. Which then that just brings me back to this point where I desperately need to play Swordcraft. Just go back to the default deck. If I win with the default deck, that's a sad statement, but it may very well be the truth. Here we have a game on Steam called Potion Pause, which seems like you play as a cat and are looking for potion ingredients in an RPG adventure. It's positive early access, $8.99 English. That looks like something that deserves the Paul list. Like, we're always looking for kid-friendly games and almost always failing to find any.
I guess you're looking for a fight.
Here we have a game on Steam called Crypt Stalker, which looks like a Castlevania 1 clone, which... okay. There might be an argument to this. It also seems to go into Game Boy mode. Maybe in the visuals. $2 English, full audio. Yeah, there's definitely people that have nostalgia for these kinds of games, so it would be worth thinking about. Although, once again, there is a lot of argument around maybe you really shouldn't like go back and try to relive that nostalgia, and maybe this screen resolution and this character here that is almost completely invisible by the same color palette in the background becomes a problem, and maybe the controls really stink, and maybe the game is really short. Like, there's, depending on how much they took from the old games and repeated versus taking more modern game designs. See, next we have a game on Steam here called My Very Own Light, which is tagged as a puzzle game, and I think it kind of is, where you have to kind of use the light to keep yourself in safety. This might be more of a tech demo, though. It's a little too unique in its art style to say it's an asset flip, though. Early access, $10.79 English French. In a weird way, French games, there was one other French game that was a lot around the idea of light also, so so maybe there is a bit of a mentality around that where light is a major focus. Projection of light is a major focus amongst French artists, French game developers. Although that really doesn't make a lot of sense when you remember that, like, Quantic Dreams, I believe, is the company, and Ubisoft are also French companies, and they generally make somewhat normal average games that don't have anything to do with the projection of light. So it's probably more of a coincidence than anything. Game of Sutra has a job listing here for a enemy designer at Gearbox, so we've now seen 2 listings, and that either means that they are scaling up to make their next Borderlands or Borderlands style game, depending on what's going on, or there was, once again, I mean, now it's increasingly less likely that there's a mass exodus at Gearbox and they're trying to replace people. I imagine if there was any exodus at all, it was a minor exodus at best, because yeah, people in Frisco, Texas are somewhat pot committed. There's only a couple other video game companies in the air without them having to move fairly across the state. And if they have to move across the state of Texas, they might as well move anywhere, and that's just too expensive. In all actuality, moving even one house down is as much of a hassle and as it is moving across the city or across the state. Once you go through that process, it is just going to be a hassle one way or another if you commit to that process. And at the moment, I don't know if too many game developers can afford to move. And certainly you could get into deeper arguments about how unfair your decision personally about where you live is tied to where you can afford to pay for renting and the cost of goods and services, and where somebody has decided to make a office or a factory. Sure, not everybody can be granted free decision to live in Hawaii, but it would certainly be nicer if there was just some small aspect of an average United States citizen's life that isn't completely determined by a current or future employer. So much your retirement, your health, your where you live, which then inherently means where your kids will go to school, which then inherently might mean how well educated your kids are. All determined by corporations employing you. Moving on though, we have a TechRaptor article. The Acclaim co-founder forms a new publishing studio, Accelerate Games. Now, the question certainly to ask here is, the Acclaim co-founder the person who sold Acclaim and led Acclaim to become what it is? Or was he the good founder, Activision president and Acclaim Entertainment co-founder Greg Fishbach has founded a new publishing studio. You were seeing a lot of depictions of toy soldiers. That doesn't, I think, inherently mean that they have the rights to toy soldiers. I wouldn't be surprised if this publishing company has the rights to basically nothing at the moment and it's just starting up. It says, let's see, Accelerate Games has 3 other founders: former Sony Online Entertainment Technical Director Philip Clavel as Operations Engineer in Gaming. Handling marketing, data, and finance is Rabbit Inc. Strategy Officer John Chow. And completing the studio's lineup is Single Studios GM Brett Gao. Accelerate's first title will be the next installment in Gao and Signal's Toy Soldiers franchise, so the relationship between Accelerate and Signal is a little different to the regular deal between publishers and developers might expect to see. So they basically made a publishing company to publish Toy Soldiers, which at best I think there were 2 Toy Soldiers games, and at worst I think one of those was probably just a remaster or a generic continuation of the Toy Soldiers franchise. If I recall correctly, the Toy Soldiers franchise is mostly a tower defense game where you can place battalions and gunners, and then you can maybe control them. So it felt a little bit maybe more like Plants vs. Zombies, but Plants vs. Zombies is also a tower defense game, pretty much also, and it definitely wasn't as strategy looking or feeling as Plants vs. Zombies was. Alright, so I can do 3 damage, which basically means I can do this, and then I did it wrong, so I lost anyways. Next we have a game on Steam called Team Z, which is a zombie Roblox looking game. Maybe there's a little bit more polish here in the fact that I just see a ton of stuff in the background, and generally you see basically nothing. Early access $8.99, single player. I'll put this on the follow list. It would be really weird though at this point to have anything that looks like a low polygonal Roblox game actually succeed. It would just be so visually easy to dismiss this, and Team Z as a title doesn't even stand out enough. Well, the odds, I'm going to put Team Z on the fall. The odds, though, are not good, certainly, that anything like that would
I have this covered.
gain attention, and it's frankly a little crazy how much attention you really need to make a game succeed. Sorry, I'm yawning. Here we have a game on Steam called the Schizophrenic Dynasty of Mueller, with 2 umlauts, I believe is what that's called, under it. And this really looks like a little too simplistic of an art style, frankly. Almost feels like it's black paper and glue, or some weird charcoal paper art style. It's tagged as a visual novel, and I think interactive text-based game like this probably is missing something. Not sure I even want to play a game where it is just somebody with schizophrenia in general, because that's very, very difficult to depict in a good way that is an understandable, realizable game. It's $10.99, which is also fairly expensive. Russian, Spain, Spanish, and Portuguese. I'm gonna have to say no to this one. See, I was sorting my old Xbox 360 games and looked at like Alice Madness Return, and that's kind of a great example of the Alice series, made by someone who admittedly had abuse in their own childhood, and it is definitely coming out in Madness Returns, and you can definitely see it in the backgrounds. But on the other hand, I would say the thing that the Alice series manages to do for most people, I think, is put just standard 3D platforming action games elements and puzzling in there. It isn't the only focus. If Alice Madness Returns was literally just an interactive story, then it would not have been anywhere as popular, I'm sure. Binding of Isaac is pretty much the exact same thing, where you have a creator who's was abused as a child, and you can clearly see that that's coming out in the themes of the Binding of Isaac game. But what does he do to make that game popular? Is he makes a really, really well designed, polished roguelike, to the point where The Binding of Isaac would almost certainly be a much better seller if there was just a mod or skin to take out the crazy parts, the religious iconography and all of that. And at a certain point, I think there is probably a decent argument for him to be told, like, you need to reskin Binding of Isaac and sell it again, because that'll make you a lot more money, and money would certainly help you and your family a lot more. And of course, artists don't like their art tinkered with, so that probably wouldn't be a comfortable conversation for anyone involved. But those are kind of like great examples. There's even a visual novel called The Devil Among Us that I think probably has more of a better idea, and like JJ Mack probably does it better. Sooner Sacrifice almost certainly does it better. And Sooner Sacrifice is kind of a great exception in the sense that there's actually very little gameplay in there. But in almost every art form depicting craziness, is always TV craziness. It's not real world craziness. It's not smearing feces on the wall craziness. It's not I literally have no reason for doing this, thinking this, or saying this, or no reason that even could make sense to a crazy person. True, just off the wall insanity is just that, and that's not what usually gets depicted because it's doesn't really help. Even like horror games where it is like The Evil Within is kind of a great example of that. Even The Evil Within 1, they depict craziness, but then there's a definite storyline reason why every single monster you saw is the way it was. There's a storyline reason, from what I hear, why every monster in the Silent Hill series is the way it is, even if some of the later series of Silent Hill have like the sexy nurses showing up when they really wouldn't make sense to show up, but their existence made sense when they first arrived, at least. Moving on, Gamatsu has an article. Fortnite's PS5 and Xbox Series enhancements have been detailed. It'll run at 4K resolution at 60 frames per second on the PS5 and Xbox Series X. I imagine there will be a small contingent of people that still want to play Fortnite when these new consoles come out and get in the hands of kids. Dynamic visuals and physics for the Xbox Series X doesn't really mean anything. 1080p 60 for the Series S. And apparently you're going to have better networking and enhanced split screen, which that's actually rather interesting to say split screen is even being mentioned, because it definitely felt like that could have been mostly forgotten about in this new generation. But I guess competition is fairly high because slowly but surely they're leaking enough information to make these new consoles feel like they are everything you would want or would have already had in the previous consoles. They're not going to skimp anywhere. For the PlayStation 5, it's 4K 60 frames per second, dynamic visuals and physics, DualSense controller immersion, so the controller for the DualSense will be a little bit better, different. Favorite game modes go straight to the home screen, and better networking and enhanced split screen. Apparently you get some more bonuses for playing on the new consoles too. Let's play Ward. Do we want to do anything more?
You're done for.
Can we win here?
This is our way out.
I don't think so. Next, we have a game on Steam here called Floor 13 Deep State, which is tagged as a interactive fiction point and click game. The question here,
You see, only getting stronger.
it's $17.99, a bunch of languages. Is this a game that possibly could be worth $17.99? Because it looks to me like you're mostly going to be just doing text decisions left and right. Yeah, I'm not seeing any interactive, even point and click, in the idea that you would control a character and have them walk to different places and talk to different people. I just don't think that there's enough of a game here for that price. That price is very, very high. Let's do that. Okay. Can we possibly win here?
It won't be long now.
I'll save you all. No one gets past me.
I think we can.
Shining hope.
Nice swordsmanship.
was all mine.
Back up to C2. We keep bouncing back and forth, and we can see we're barely making any progress. TechRaptor has an article here. Curve Digital acquires For the King creator Iron Oak Games. So, okay. There's been an acquisition. Does not really mean anything. Probably not immediately. TechRaptor has an article here. George Orwell's Animal Farm launches the December 10th. Which we're still not 100% sure how much of a game this really is. See, it could be just a highly visual experience, or it could be a highly text experience. Actually, I meant to say it could be a highly visual novel, and or it could actually have some interactive parts. I feel like a lot of the quote-unquote classic books, which let's just grant, just for the sake of argument, the Animal Farm is a classic book. I feel like they are heavy thought-provoking and text-based, which video games in general are much more action-based and don't really work on that. I suppose it's not super video game news, but apparently Sean Connery died at the age of 90. I guess I hadn't seen him in a while, so he could be fairly sick. He could have been. He of course played James Bond, so his tentative connection there is he was the actor who played James Bond, who potentially was then replicated, but probably never even voiced in a video game. Yeah, I don't think he ever did any video game voice acting. I know Patrick Stewart has, certainly, but not a lot of actors, particularly of older generations, have ever voiced in video games. So, yeah. And that is kind of a prime example of something that's not really video game news related. I've been looking at this game, Human Factory. This looks like a joke troll game in which humans are being, like, ranched, for lack of a better term, to be turned into meat and eaten. It's early access, $22.49, really expensive, terrible graphics. So, yeah. That is as an example of something that is not quality enough. I can see the beginning of the end, and we should probably try to wrap up in the next hour. Gamatsu has an article here. Bright Memory Infinite has more screenshots, but at a certain point you have to remember that Bright Memory, the original game, was pretty much retconned into being a demo for Bright Memory Infinite, and now they've been teasing Bright Memory Infinite for about a year, and they're putting out more screenshots to tease it more. And all of this is going to kind of play in a funny way, as far as I imagine Bright Memory Infinite is not really being developed by one person, yet a lot of people are going to be tricked into believing that it is, since the original Bright Memory was allegedly made by one person, and that hype certainly caught a lot of people's attention. Moving on, Gamma Sutra has an article here. Bringing more franchises to mobile is Activision Blizzard's biggest opportunity, says the COO. We need to make sure we're enabling our franchises on the billions of mobile devices that are available right now. That's by far our biggest opportunity, and we're investing meaningfully to capitalize on this and take all of our franchises mobile over time, which inherently that idea makes sense, but that also is the exact thought that nobody wants to hear for Activision Blizzard products, or yeah, frankly any of them. Like,
You're done for.
yeah, that was the exact same thing that Bethesda and ZeniMax, well, Bethesda specifically, said they were going to do, is that they were going to try and bring a bunch of things to mobile. And I think Activision Blizzard also said that at BlizzCon, so there was kind of two very controversial announcements a couple of years ago about mobile gaming and bringing mobile gaming. And at the core of it, Hearthstone is already on cell phones, so that they're talking things like Overwatch, World of Warcraft MMO, StarCraft, Warcraft, Diablo. Those are the games that Blizzards are known for. And if you're talking Activision games, there isn't even a lot recently that people would even like from Activision. So then you're talking a much shorter list of older games that really wouldn't transfer well to mobile.
I earned my fair share.
And I've lost.
Can you dodge this? Such amazing skill.
But in all fairness, I don't know what Activision Blizzard really could come out and say, other than that we've decided to completely change and do a 180, which would probably hurt their shares. And we're going to split Activision away from Blizzard, and we're going to be all about games. Even at that point, so many people have left Blizzard from the company, they just don't have the they don't have the talent there anymore at Blizzard to potentially maintain or create new games. I'm just gonna keep on playing Swordcraft. Apologies if that's boring. So, for their own share prices, them just milking things is about all they can do until they finally sell. Selling would be the one thing that would satisfy both the shareholders and the gamers, is to say, hey, we're getting rid of all of the Activision accountants that are in charge, and Microsoft or some other big company has bought the license to all of our games. Even at that, some of the older games like StarCraft and Warcraft probably aren't going to play particularly well on an Xbox Series X, just because they're mouse and keyboard type games. But it would be something I wouldn't be surprised if Microsoft tried. Moving on, we have a game on Steam here called Intern Pursuit Game, which looks like it is probably just an asset flip. Well, they're calling it a third-person tower defense game. You see, this is so ridiculous that these screenshots just don't want to load, because I was sitting here for several seconds just watching the video, and these screenshots just don't load until you apparently trigger them. So, I feel like more than anything, this is probably the back-end server's fault of Steam's. I believe it's actually an Akamai server, because all the links say Akamai. I keep looking at the links saying, well, is there something I could like green list? Yeah, so a tower defense game, and like all other tower defense games, thus inherently uninteresting. Next, we have a game on Steam here called Shades of Heroes, which looks like a collectible card game. It's free to play. And then you've got like some leg being shown by fairly softly drawn art, fantasy art characters. Yeah, I don't know if there's enough here that would make me want to do this. Here you can see an elf character. It would be fairly easy to take a game like Shadowverse and just hand all that art to a new artist and say, make something legally distinctive, different from this, but somewhat in the same mentality. Although, if you are just going to rip off a fantasy game, it's going to look like every other ripoff, or it's going to look like every other fantasy collectible card game that exists. Do I want to put this on the fall list? Well, it's free to play with in-app purchases, which you would be expect, but then it's a third-party account and third-party EULA. I don't know if the art is good. A good or evil strategy might ruin a card game if you can only play like good cards or bad cards. Yeah, not really seeing a lot here different. I probably should just put cards on the fall list though. There's a decent argument to playing the new Destiny Child game if it's less lewd, but I doubt it would be less lewd. Like, it probably will be
You wouldn't.
the same level of lewdness. See, here this video is showing me a 3D model of this character, and there's just like no reason that there should be 3D models of a character for a collectible card game. As nice as that might be, like even animating that for a trailer sounds like you're wasting your time. Yeah, this game has too many caveats to it. I'm not gonna put it on the fall list.
You wouldn't.
Next we have a game on Steam here called Deception, which has literally 0 tags, so they didn't even bother to tag it themselves. Which, the tags on Steam are kind of confusing in the fact that you can have the creator tag their game and then the community can tag their game, but for new games almost certainly nobody actually has tagged it, and then almost all the tags, I imagine for almost all the games, are put there by the creators as a way of promoting their own game more than anything.
You're done for.
I've faith in my blade. Take that.
Don't you pull your claws out at me, mister.
Yeah, Deception is $9.59 English Italian, and it seems like there's nothing really there as far as game. Here we have Election 2020 Battle for the Throne, a joke political game for $1.49 English and Russian. Surprise there. No surprise there, really. Here we have a game called Free Survival, which almost certainly is just an asset flip attempt at making a game.
I will win this battle.
This is an interesting idea of a building is on fire and you've got to potentially escape, but that's really more of something like a sequence than something you could do forever. Like you could have a sequence where a building's on fire, and that's a great way to make a player potentially run through an area they've already been through once before, but that's pretty much a sequence. We've seen that happen with
Won't be long now.
some of the Lara Croft games where there would be fire sections where you're having to rush through that.
This was a failure.
Oh, that's what it says, is fire survival. I thought it said free. Man, I misread that completely. This is English Chinese. It's $4.19. It's clearly just a low effort asset flip. Let's see, here we go. It's 6 random characters in a single floor dungeon. That's the whole game. which I would tend to believe them. And they're selling it for $3.99 English only, and literally nothing more to say there. Looks like they're trying to have some Pokemon style concept. Here we have a game on Steam called Obey the Law, which frankly that feels a little bit more like a potential political game than it probably should be. And then you see them immediately shooting somebody. VR $14.99 English and only.
Shining hope.
What a head scratcher. I yield.
Let's see. We can do this.
Speed things up.
We can do this.
Oh crap, they spotted
Too
me.
slow.
And then we can hit that.
Wouldn't.
And we can kind of evolve here. And kill that, I guess.
Oh dear.
Next, we have a game on Steam called Freddy Spaghetti 2, which I bet there was a one where you're playing as a piece of spaghetti / worm. And see, this is like an I Am Toast style game, which arguably I'm not even sure I would want to actually play I Am Toast. So I'm not super interested in this. It's $2.39. The price is decent. 41 achievements though makes me feel like it's probably an achievement game, English only. If we were to look at Freddy Spaghetti 1, that came out April 2020 and has 17 positive reviews, which is not really enough reviews to make me want to potentially put it on the wish list. Let's see, ambush.
Dead men tell no tales.
Then that.
I live by the sword.
Hit that.
Too slow.
And hit that. Seems like we had a whole run here of low effort games that got approved. Here we have one called Counter Operation Online, which looks like a first person shooter. It's actually visually polished enough to not call it an asset flip game.
You wouldn't.
Let's see. It's early access for $8.99 English only. It's online player versus player. I still don't think there'd probably be enough of a community for a game like this, but if I played player versus player online games, there might be something there I'd consider. Let's see. RetroPie has an announcement here that Image 4.7 is now available. It includes a variety of changes and improvements. The 4.6 had beta support for the Raspberry Pi 4. We believe it to work well enough to remove the beta label. It also supports the new Pi 400, which I'm not even 100% sure what the Pi 400 is. I'll read out the changes, but I don't think that there's a real reason to mention it. Okay. So we do that. And that gives us 9.9. Play this.
At your service. Take
And then
that.
we kill that.
Can you
And
dodge
that.
this?
I was naive.
So they've uploaded to the latest Raspberry Pi iOS Buster image. Buster being one of the latest Debian Linux builds. In a funny way, I'm kind of abandoning Debian Linux, which I've been using in my home lab for probably 6 or 7 years, plus maybe double that.
I'll have them all.
Moving over to CentOS 7. I feel like 6 or 7 years ago, had I moved to CentOS, I might have been a little bit better, but uh, better equipped to potentially work for corporations that want to use CentOS or Red Hat Linux instead of Debian, because I don't think too many corporations want to use Debian. But also, I imagine it would have been a lot more of a hassle. Nowadays, like every day, frankly, there's always a major enough improvement to Linux that, well, I don't mean to say every day, I mean to say now pretty much all the Linux servers or Linux softwares work well enough for everything. They added Expand Neo, which is a Linux driver for the Xbox One wireless gamepad. They upgraded RetroArch to 1.8.8. They added MAME standalone emulator building from the latest code. I'll skip some of these emulators. Updated a lot of the emulators, like the Atari emulator, the ScumVM emulator, just to name a couple.
Too slow.
Some of these softwares are being emulated, but I'm not sure exactly what they're even used for. They updated Attract mode to support Raspberry Pi, Raspberry Pi 4, and KMS, which I don't know what KMS is. Yeah, a lot of these updates don't mean a lot. RetroPie doesn't update itself very often. It does it, I'd say, probably about once a year, in the same way that the Raspberry Pi updates about once a year. And I suppose if you were having major problems with the older version of RetroPie, getting an update might be a big deal. But generally, if you're going to make a Raspberry Pi emulator box with RetroPie, you don't generally, I think, want to update anything ever. You just want it to work like any other toy would work out of the box without having to connect and do an update. That's certainly, I think, the case for most people. The games themselves, the ROMs, are not going to update, so what wasn't there and what really won't ever be there is the claim that the Raspberry Pi 4 can now handle a lot more Nintendo 64 games, or that they play a lot better. That there just is not enough power there to emulate Nintendo 64 games or most of the consoles past the Nintendo 64. So the next upgrade to something like a Raspberry Pi emulator box is not to get a new Raspberry Pi and upgrade the software. It's to build a PC and then have that opportunity to run RetroArch just off of either Steam or a individual launcher, at which point you could emulate a lot of those games. Next we have a game on Steam called Asteroid, which seems like it's a game where you draw lines by connecting the stars, and then that makes a path for the character to play. It's very polygonal, but kind of artsy too. I could almost be sold on this idea. But I feel like the problem you're going to run into here is that this is going to be very simplistic gameplay. You can make little platforms. Apparently at some point she transforms into other creatures. $4.19, Japanese full audio, English, Korean, and Chinese. 1 to 2 hours of gameplay. I just don't think that there's enough there. Let's find our missions here. Let's try some runecraft. I'm tired of losing to swordcraft, so let's lose the runecraft once. Some of these pages do load. I think it's pretty much whether the pages load the images before they're suspended. So maybe if I could get my Great Suspender extension to not give me such of a hassle or not suspend the tabs as fast, maybe that would fix the screenshots not being loaded. Anyways, we have a game on Steam here called Splash, which just looks like an asset flip. Player versus player. Maybe you're throwing potions at goblins, which is free, so I can't complain too much about the quality, but it's also pretty bad, even for free. Next, we have a game on Steam called The Dealer, which looks like it's probably a joke troll game, and looks like it's mostly a text-based game. Early access, $6.29 English only. Nothing there of interest. Next, we have a game on Steam called Kaedas, which they're calling a VR shooter, and you unleash your inner Baba Yaga, and I don't quite understand what that has anything to do with anything. It seems like it's just random text, and this really just does look like a asset flip shooter, although it does have an interesting concept that we haven't been seeing done on VR games, in which your life is being depicted on like an Apple III watch. We saw that certainly depicted in GoldenEye as a concept, and then people pretty much immediately forgot about that as an idea. VR makes that more understandable, although in all fairness, it only works when you're using a longer two-handed gun. If you're shooting a one-handed gun, you would still have to swing your second hand into the screenshot, into the screen view to see your life. And I think people would more just prefer heads-up displays. So yeah, Cadus is early access for $8.99, single player, English only, VR. Just not enough there.
Time for class.
But other people definitely should steal the watch idea if they're not going to have a heads-up displays in VR games, which they seem to not be willing to do that.
Abracadabra.
Do we want to kill something here, or do we want to get ahead? I think we want to kill something here.
See you tomorrow, class.
Let's see. This one can't attack. Oh. So I literally just helped this guy win. Probably. Here we have a game on Steam called Kingdom of Force, which is pretty much a tower defense strategy game. Early access, $6.29, English and Chinese. They're calling it real-time strategy, which I'll grant them it could be described that way. There's someone's car's alarm going off. Yep, they fixed it. My walls are far too thin as far as the noise they make.
Mana, come forth.
See, moving on. Next we have a game called Nuri VR Coding. I couldn't imagine a worse idea than trying to program and code in VR. It seems like they've, if there is actually any coding here, yeah, I'm not really seeing it. More, it just seems like this is a VR example of playing with very young preschool toys, which maybe the train is being programmed in that example, but this just doesn't make a lot of sense that you would put a $600 headset on a preschooler's head. It's free to play. It's Korean only. Maybe in Korea they would do that because maybe there's cheaper headsets. But that's about the only thing I could think of as far as a reason you would ever think this was a good idea.
This match is mine. Can't be the end.
Let's see. Next we have a game on Steam called Super vs. the World, which looks like it is just once again a political troll joke game. $7.99, English only. If anything, I think it may even have more video game elements to it than most of these, but I still wouldn't recommend anybody supporting these efforts. Let's see. Gamatsu has an article here. The Dragon Quest series creator Yuji Horii teases various announcements for the 35th anniversary in 2021. Will Dragon Quest 12 finally be revealed? Which we had, I thought, a ton of Dragon Quest announcements already announced. And let's see what else. Try Dragoncraft. We'll do one Dragoncraft game, and then I think I'm gonna call it. Which one's Dragoncraft? This one? Yeah, Dragon Quest 12 in particular might be just at like the perfect point at which to go through the effort of getting into Dragon Quest without having to play all the spin-offs and all the previous games. I don't think the Dragon Quest series connects their stories that much. Although there is definitely an argument to just playing the Atelier series instead. And Dragon Quest is maybe a little bit more kid-friendly, and maybe as I'm going to very quickly start running out of Lego games to play, Dragon Quest might be a good replacement for like 3 Lego games back to back. But I don't know. I don't know if that's something I'd be willing to commit to. Next we have a game on Steam. No, we have a TechRaptor article. Wow, I totally blew that one. Middle-earth: Shadow of Mordor, which I believe is the first game, is losing its online features this year, which I don't know what online features were in the first game at all, but I feel like this is the December 31st, 2020. They'll no longer be able to features, unlike some titles where that means the death of the game. In this case, that means that some neat bonus features will no longer be accessible. Here's a quick rundown of the changes. The Nemesis Forge will not be available. You will not be able to import your Shadow of Mordor Nemesis into the sequel game, Middle-earth: Shadow of War, which is the game I never played. And I'm not sure at this point I really care enough. Shadow of Mordor might be a great example of a game that's like, yeah, you played it, but then Shadow of War had just so much BS around it, as far as them trying to put in microtransactions and trying to make the game something different that people didn't like, and not really servicing the audience in the way that the audience wanted to be serviced. It feels like it might be very easy to just never play Shadow War. So far, it's been very easy to not play Shadow War. Vendetta missions. When you kill the orc who killed a person on your friends list, that will no longer be available. Additionally, the Repaid in Blood achievement trophy, which requires completing Vendetta mission, will no longer be achievable. This really feels like, and more with all these online services, it really does feel like they probably could just run servers forever and it not really cost them that much money to do that. It really feels like you just have a case of them WB games being very cheap, and almost certainly some of that is due to the fact that WB has been acquired, and this is the first salvo more than anything of showing the level of support and care that the new owners, which I believe is AT&T, of Warner Brothers and thus Warner Brothers Games and TT Games, the creators of Lego games, just how much care and effort they're going to put into those divisions. I think that's also definitely a bad indicator for what we may see, because we may see a lot more of this. Do this.
Life upon the land.
And then evolve, I guess.
There's a lot more where that came from.
Luminescence. Shining hope.
And then the only good news here is everybody will get the Epic Runes Orc Hunter and Grave Walker, as what WB Play will no longer be available.
Take your seats, boys and girls.
But more than anything, the Middle Earth series shows a game series that had online content demanded and shoved into it, whereas nowadays pretty much all games either have online content or they're in a category of game where you would never expect it to have online content, and that the categories of games that you do expect to see online content have not drastically increased. They definitely did move the marker at some point where we started to see a lot more games have online content, but I don't expect that Tomb Raider would have an online tie-in, or even a new Uncharted, or even a God of War game will have an online tie-in, whereas I still expect that to be in first-person shooter games. I imagine the split there really is that they either start their game saying this is going to be a games of service, and even that concept is failing slowly and people are abandoning it, or people know that it's going to be mostly a single player or completely a single player experience. Right. It's going to be easier at this point just to finish this. And these special missions are being advertised, but not being advertised as well as you would think. Do we have new stories and missions? I don't think so. Nope. No new stories and missions. But also worth mentioning that we have not... I really haven't gotten around to having that free time to finishing the last bits of here of the story either. Let's see. So let's just wrap up on the news then, I guess. Here we have a game called Last Hope on Earth, which looks like it's an asset flip survival game, although asset flip survival games tend to look fairly good. There's a lot of stuff here, clearly, but it's not widescreen. It's early access $9.59 with third-party accounts and in-user license agreement, which allowing no-name companies to require third-party accounts and third-party ULAs is another element that I feel like Steam needs to curate away from and say, hey, we're not going to list this game if you're going to put in this extra legalese that we either have to have our lawyers then look at, or if you're going to make people sign up to some shady account that will just advertise to them forever. Let's see. Next, we have a game on Steam called Superior Wizards, which looks like a pretty ugly game. $9.99 English only. Next, we have a game on Steam called Blocks Stacking, which looks like it's a VR game where you're stacking little Tetris pieces. $2.54 English only. TechRaptor has an article here. Shark Mob's first game is a Vampire the Masquerade Battle Royale. Here you can see a vampire seemingly ready to pounce. It's very nice visuals, but, well, is this video going to play or not? And that took forever. Don't know here if that's really what you can want to focus on, is the idea of you're going to be playing as a character running around the general dark city of the Vampire the Masquerade universe that we see. And here you have her in a bra covered in blood or sweat, player versus play. I guess there is a general idea there, though, like, you probably are making a Vampire the Masquerade regular game, so you probably already have some 3D environments in development in the can. You probably already have some 3D character skins, 3D animations and interactions. Making a battle royale does allow you to kind of make some money while you're slowly working on improving those same action things. It would be very, very silly if they never came out with a action hack and slash or shooter style Vampire the Masquerade game after making a battle royale, but maybe the battle royale would really succeed. I can't immediately think of a gameplay mechanic that gets introduced because you're playing as vampires, other than possibly a blood mechanic instead of a stamina or health mechanic. There might be some NPCs that you could bite and turn to your side, and maybe the visuals themselves as they're being advertised might pull a lot of people away from Fortnite. But I'm not sure. Like, if visuals were as important as people think, Fortnite wouldn't have been successful in the first place. So much of it has to do with just whatever the streamers play, and I could certainly see a lot of parents not liking the bloodiness, the violence, and or the characters running around showing so much skin, as the like psychosexual nature of vampires have always existed. So I could see a lot of parents not letting their kids play the Vampire the Masquerade game, and I can also see just a general burnout for Battle Royale games. Moving on, let's wrap up as fast as we can here. We have something called Boomface, which is just an asset flip first-person shooter with some puzzling and platforming in it, I think, too, but it's all Minecraft-y. $6.99 English only. See, next we have a game on Steam here called Book of Shadows, which I'm always trying to find a Western game that actually works. This is a low polygon point and click puzzle game, which definitely feels different, although I don't know why low polygon and Western. Doesn't really feel like that's a concept that makes any sense. And then you're a dark wizard in the Western area. Yeah, none of this makes any sense. It's $1.49. It's English Russian. It's clearly just an asset flip. Like mixing wizards and westerns. There might be a really good author that could do something like that, but yeah, I don't know. Czech Raptor has an article here. Why are horror games so appealing? Appalling might be a good word too. If that interests you, it seems like this is a rather short video, short game that then links to a video of Under Fire Media, which has 684 subscribers. Geez, I almost have as many subscribers as that. Yeah, I'm almost up to 400 at this point. I really would like to see that double though. Like if we could get it to 800, I still wouldn't be able to monetize. But yeah, if I could have monetized this year and I was up to 400, I probably would have gotten somewhere around $350 in ad revenue this year. Which that's not any livable wage, and at any point my situation could certainly change and I might need to quit streaming completely, but without any announcement, but it would have certainly been helpful. Tank Raptor wraps up here going, in short, we play scary games because they're a powerful means of escapism, be it a subconscious thing or just a sense of excitement when we get from overcoming something scary. Horror games are fun, even if they scare us in the moment. The feeling afterwards is rewarding enough to keep us coming back for more year after year. And personally, I don't feel like scary games, horror games affect me the same. They don't scare me. I have a fairly great sense of the difference between reality and fiction, and even at that, I really am not very much afraid of a human body in any state. As someone who enjoyed watching autopsies on YouTube a couple of years back, it's clinical and scientific to me, so I can very easily see like a monster like this and go, all right, well, this monster definitely needs some dental work and definitely needs a haircut, and only if he was actually in front of me posing an actual threat to me do I then have a reason to realistically be afraid of them. But also, monsters mostly don't come in this form, and they don't look like that. In fact, usually monsters look exactly like humans, and they are just mental monsters doing horrific, more complicated, more planned out things than just running towards you and attacking you. So you certainly have to keep a scale to that. But the one thing I can kind of applaud for horror games is the idea of being unique in your art style. So often we see the exact same low effort asset flip games. Here's a military or military games, even AAA military games. They're just, hey, we're just recreating something that already existed in reality. We're not putting any fashion into it, any architecture into it, any art in any way to it at all. We're just offering the same that has been offered before, and that's not very creative. And certainly in horror games you also see that, where they're just zombie games, and here's some more zombie games, and here's some more zombie games. That's why something like Lollipop Chainsaw or Oni Chambra are much more interesting zombie games, because they take the cliche, the trope of zombies, and expand upon them by having big boobed female characters be the protagonist, and in the case of Lollipop Chainsaw, using a chainsaw to kill everybody, and Oni Chambra using a samurai sword to kill everybody. Even a little bit of variety there is more interesting than your standard zombie games. I'd also say horror games tend to be fairly predictable compared to other stories. You probably, in more in movies and TV shows than video games, but you probably would do a lot better to have a jump scare or something scary happen in a non-scary movie affect people than to have a scary movie that just establishes itself as it's going to try and scare you, and then it usually fails because then you're on guard and you're expecting it. The Haunting of Hill House is kind of a great example of that too, where they tell you it's a horror series up front, but then the real story and the revelation, the mystery of the Haunting of Hill House is way more interesting than the horror part, where I'd say the Haunting of Bly House I think was a troubled development from what I'm hearing, and it doesn't really tell you a much of a story or mystery. It tells you a story, but the story tells you exactly what's happening as it's happening, so there's no intrigue there. You're just being told this happened, then this happened, then this happened, and there's some ghosts here and there, but then the ghost part of the story is barely explained or even relevant in the long run. Moving on, we have a game on Steam here called Street Massacre, which looks like it's a medium effort. I don't use that phrase very often. Streets of Rage beat 'em up. It's $1.79. It's English only. Seems like it's keyboard only. Here he recorded his mouse cursor while he was playing, which is pretty bad. Although I think I've probably done that. Street Massacre is just not polished enough to be on the follow list. Next, we have a game on Steam here called Mini Strike, which apparently is a pixely bullet hell shooter, which means you absolutely will not be able to see anything on the screen at all, and you can see that is definitely the case. And it's such a small 4:3 ratio screen, $1.59 English only, nothing there worth mentioning other than that. Here we have a game called the Benza RPG, which looks like it is a joke troll game. At least I would have thought it was a full motion video game, but apparently not. Epic quest to fix a broken toilet seat and save the world. Yeah, free, English and Japanese. Says it has Japanese full audio. I bet it doesn't. I bet they have an audio clip of like some Japanese character saying one word and they repeat it over and over again. Yeah, if it even has that much. Vice has an article here that says how Sierra was captured, then killed by a massive accounting fund. Which that might be interesting. It's a new self-published autobiography from Ken Williams. Okay. Yeah, we kind of know that these first generation companies, Sierra being a great example of that, really got run into the ground due to accounting funds and people that didn't know what they were doing. It's nice to look here though. This is the makeup of like first generation game companies here. Notice there are a lot of women at Sierra. A lot. And that was well known. There was definitely at some point a decline of women being hired and women being allowed to work in anything other than secretary pools, or which I guess secretary pools started to die. I bet there weren't that many secretary pools in the first place. I seriously doubt all the women we're seeing up front here also were just typing up code that was being handwritten or dictated by programmers. No programmer worth their weight could work that way. But yeah, as these corporations came in, and this is kind of the institutionalized sexism of corporations in the United States in the late 80s and 90s and 2000s, even to this day, the big corporations more and more drove out women and wouldn't hire women based on sexism of the CEOs, which inherently makes a great argument that CEOs should not have so much power and that there should be maybe more boards and maybe even diversity boards to enforce the boards who are the CEOs and such. But even that really doesn't work too well, because even if you do get a like minority female on a CEO board, they're still so rich that they will not vote for their class or their minority status as that much. Also, there's just way too many females that are being filled in HR in video game companies, and way too many females that are just getting better jobs. Like, I can only say maybe 10%, 15% of it has to do with the fact that second wave feminism was all about women going out and having their own job and controlling their own finances, and there has been a small resurgence of that where small percentage of women now is like, no, I'll just get married. I'll just marry somebody rich. But you can see here, like, 2 female breaking ground. Sierra definitely also was improved heavily by the fact that it had females on its writing staff. And Sierra was a very text-based writing company, so that would also make sense. Oh my goodness. I sadly think I still have this sofa. A sofa with the same pattern. Not that exact sofa. Man. But yeah, this is a long Vice article. Generally, I don't read Vice articles, but in this one exception, I will say, looks like you are actually going to get it. Now, of course, you know this is Vice also, so they're inherently highlighting the female groups and perhaps unfairly ignoring the male employees. Like, this is a husband-wife team, so you have Robert and Ken Williams, still married, I believe even today, which that's surprising alone. But yeah, in this one small exception, I'll say maybe check that out. I'm also going to leave that tab open so I can edit out all of the ads later. I did try to figure out how to program some of the uBlock Origin cosmetic filtering better. There are a few commands, like 5 or 6, that might be useful, but it's really not a very descriptive coding system. Not as descriptive or useful as I'd like it to be. Here we have a game on Steam called Cube Crisis, which seems like you're just pressing keys to make a cube jump, as almost like a line rider game. It's $2.99 English and Chinese, clearly a low effort game. Xbox has the streaming services for Apple TV and others announced for the Xbox Series X and S. So it's a long list here of what you'd come to expect. You pretty much expect it to have everything: Netflix, Disney Plus, HBO Max, Spotify, YouTube. I guess Sling might be one you might be concerned about. YouTube TV, Amazon Prime Video, Hulu. YouTube TV existing is kind of sucks. NBC Peacock, the new name. Vudu, Fandango now, Twitch, Sky Go. We're not seeing like a BBC player, BBC America or anything. That might be something that people would be interested in. Crunchyroll and things like that. Crunchyroll would be a big one because Sony's about to acquire Crunchyroll, so you very possibly will get an Xbox Series X or S and not be able to watch Crunchyroll if you really want to watch Crunchyroll anime. Although, if you're getting a new console, ideally, probably at that point, you also need to get a new TV, 4K TV, and a Roku TV, or a Roku plugged into a TV, probably fixes a lot of your problems anyways for whatever small thing might be missing. Yeah, I'm seeing an advertisement for Mythic Quest Ravens Banquet. I didn't know that. I must be thinking of a different show than Mythic Quest, I guess. Yeah, I think I am. So yeah, pretty much expect that. Like, there's not anything that's totally missing. Not like if they were missing Amazon Prime, which they don't. They have that. Amazon Instant Video is what it's labeled now. Or if they were missing Netflix, or if they were missing Hulu, or if they were missing Disney Plus, or if they were missing Twitch, that would be a problem, or YouTube. But that they've got the ones that they need to get. Here, Gamatsu has a better list of it. Sky Go, Sky Ticket, Voodoo, and more. Yep. There has been a considerable lack of emphasis in this release as far as trying to make the Xbox Series S or Series X a streaming box. That concept has fallen to the wayside. Thank goodness. Nobody really is going to pay $500-$600 for a console to stream services when you can get a Roku for less than $100 to do the same thing, or just play it on your phone. So it does feel like they will be all focused around games and only games. Next, we have a game on Steam here called Foglight, which looks like it's an asset flip game where you're running away from a Bigfoot creature, which I'm a little surprised that there aren't more horror games where you're being chased by a Yeti, Sasquatch, or some other cryptid. $4.99 English full audio. And the thing there too is you could easily make a horror game where you're investigating these cryptids or hunting cryptids, to maybe even like Supernatural, which I'm actually surprised after 15 seasons of the Supernatural TV series that they never made a video game that I know of. Yeah, I don't think they ever did. I wouldn't be surprised if they did after that and they got the actors to voice act it. But yeah, you could have several instances in which you were finding several different cryptids. Until Dawn sort of felt like it was going in that direction, but they didn't continue that idea in the Dark Pictures anthology as far as I could tell. And it seems like just everybody wants to do zombies because zombies have already been animated and established, and you can have lots of zombies, where if you were going to have a Sasquatch movie, you would then have to, or video game, you'd have to kind of introduce the idea that you've found some kind of secret valley or forest that is full of Sasquatches and they're going to attack you like crazy. Or you do something like Amnesia, where it's just one big giant Sasquatch is going to stalk you the whole time, and I don't know if you can get a full game around that. Next, we have a game on Steam here called The Wizard and the Slug. This almost feels like a Boy in the Blob reference. It looks like it's a 3D platformer. I'm not 100% sure on it. It's $8.99 English only, and seems like sometimes you play as the wizard and sometimes you play as a slug, and it seems like you are platforming, and very possibly this is going to be a frustrating platformer. A lot of the art feels inconsistent and not great in quality, and it does feel like it's just all over the place. And why are we seeing like Asian characters when it says it's English only is the question. Yeah, there's just too many question marks there. TechRaptor has this article, I remember this from Friday. Lego Universe Emulator enters talks with Lego to legitimize the project. Lego Universe is a long dead MMORPG where players could make some cool creations with the titular bricks. I guess there was a game called Lego World. I guess it went Lego Universe, then they made Lego World, and now Lego Universe emulator is trying to bring it back. It was released in 2010. Well, Lego Universe might be the game I'm thinking of. It originally cost money and then it was free to play. The thing here, I think more than anything, is the idea if Lego works with this fan group to make Lego Universe emulator work, then Lego is getting in bed with somebody other than TT Games to make digital Lego products, which Lego has to continuously push into digital products, and they've tried, and they're slowly getting better at it, but they haven't really knocked the ball out of the park or anything with it. They've made some cell phone games, and they've had some other companies make cell phone games for them, and that's about it at this point. Versus TT Games that makes the standard Lego games that, like Lego Star Wars, that we're all familiar with, or we should be familiar with if you're watching my channel, at least. So if they could get Lego Universe to run and make money off of that, I think Lego would be very happy about that. And this says, in short, Dark Flame Universe may continue to work on this project with the blessing of Lego, and more importantly, no fear of getting taken down by a DMCA. There is actual legal precedent, and Nintendo in particular refuses to believe this because Nintendo continuously believes that the Japanese copyright law, as they interpret it, applies to all products around the world, which I think that's their core argument, if they're trying to make any argument. Otherwise, they, I think, probably just believe that copyright is only there in existence to benefit Nintendo and no one else, and thus they DMCA tons of emulators. But nobody has money to fight them, so that's the problem with the copyright law, as it were. And that there just isn't anybody crazy enough to fight them in court, frankly, even if they did have the money. Anyways, it's really just a great example of the issues there, where if Nintendo had allowed other emulator projects to exist with their blessing and potentially made some money off of some of the emulator projects that exist, they'd be in a much better place as far as people being happy with Nintendo. And it really is coming to a boil, particularly for Nintendo, in the fact that they used emulators to release Mario 64 and Sunshine and Galaxy on their own console, and did such a pathetic job at it that it became an issue. I'm getting a phone call, so I'm gonna mute myself. Sorry, that was just the groceries people telling me that they're going to be here at 2 o'clock my time, which seems kind of fairly ridiculous to be told that, but alright. Here we have a game on Steam called Demonizer, which is a shoot 'em up. I'm not interested in that. 9% discount is interesting for $10.91, English only. And you know what I think we'll do today is that we will actually just choose to not go through the Twitter feed, and we'll leave that for Wednesday, I suppose. Here we have a game on Steam called Bean Climber, which is obviously just getting over it with Benet Foddy again. $5.99, English full audio with a lot of other languages. That's not making it to the fall list. Let's see. Here we have a game on Steam called Reality, which this feels almost like an MTV art style. Like, almost like this is what some angsty rock and roller character would draw, teenager would draw. I'm not sure I hate the art style though. It's different. And it's tagged as a psychedelic action RPG. It's 59 cents, English only. I'll put it on the fall list just because of a unique art style. I don't hate that. Let's see. Next we have a game on Steam here called Today is My Birthday, which looks like it's a horror game that maybe has enough polish here. $12.74, English Russian. Despite the fact of being Russian, I'll give it a chance. We have a TechRaptor article here. Haven's PS4 and Switch versions were delayed due to COVID-19, which okay. The idea of Haven here, just seeing the screenshot of the two characters being potentially in love and actually being friendly with each other is kind of a unique idea, certainly, in the sense that you generally have a lot more lust than love in video games and just all forms of media. It's really hard to get those small, simple bits depicted in any art form. Just, more sitting around and watching Netflix, less Netflixing, chilling, as it were. But that is certainly something that would be appreciated. There really is not a lot of romance in any art form, but particularly in video games. Here we have a game on Steam called Stirring Abyss, which looks like I think we may have even looked at this game before. A Lovecraftian underwater adventure, kind of Diablo-esque. 21-24, bunch of languages, third-party EULA, 41% positive, so people do seem to be liking it. If any of the screenshots want to load, while the screenshots decided whether or not they're going to load, I'm going to reload the Humble Bundle and see if we have any new Humble Bundles, which I doubt we really do. Let's see. Thrills and Chills ends in 23 hours as far as the games bundle, and there's no other games bundle, so yeah, no surprise there. But we'll probably get a new bundle for Thanksgiving. Yeah, this looks good enough that it might be something. And then on my Twitter feed, yeah, we weren't gonna bother to do anything with that, so I'll leave that where it is. So yep, that's gonna be it for this stream. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want to friend or follow me on any social media sites, there's a whole bunch of links down below in the description box. And if you want to support me further, there's a link to Patreon, or you can friend me on Steam and get me a game off my wishlist. Thank you for watching.